Gary Vaynerchuk for Cork'd.com, and we are here with James from Langmeil. Why don't you tell the Cork'd audience who you are and a little bit about Langmeil here from Barossa?
All right. Well, this is our family winery from the Barossa. Established it in 1996 on a very old property that was first sort of settled in 1841.
So 1996 was the first vintage.
Yeah, well, 1996 was the first attempted vintage at this basically abandoned winery. So yeah, but 97 was the first vintage that we really sort of got stuck in.
Got it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, as many of you know from my history, I built Wine Library on Australian wines. The 1998 Barossa Valley vintage is a signature. Probably, when it's all said and done, one of the last bottle of wines I'll ever drink on this earth, you know, as long as I can time it properly, is going to be a 98 Australian wine, because it means so much to me. I was able to build Wine Library on a lot of the brands from Barossa, because Australia was just starting to become a premium player. Outside of Penfolds and Yalumba, there was a couple of producers, this whole new wave of new producers. Langmeil was a producer that I found very, very early on, and I would say maybe even 98 vintage we carried, maybe 99 when I think about it. Definitely 01, I remember carrying it extensively. So I have a very warm spot in my heart for your family's winery, because we've done a lot of business with you guys through the years through different negotiants. Where are you guys now? Have you guys been affected by the Australian bubble? You know, I mean, I definitely think that there's been some, difficult times in the U.S. market, and definitely the premium stuff has felt it. What's happened in the last 5 or 6 years with the winery and in the U.S. market with your wines?
Well, just in general, I suppose Langmeil, we've continued to sort of go from strength to strength, and that sort of is mainly at home as well as a few key sort of markets abroad.
How much is your wine sold within your domestic market?
We sell about 70%. We always believed, if you can't be heroes at home, what's the go? So,
sure. And has that grown over the last 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So early on, you were doing more exporting.
Well, we sort of started at home, cellar-door. We have a very busy winery, so people come and visit us, taste our wines, and that's a really key component of our total business.
Sure.
So that's been really strong, and that's just steadily grown.
Good.
And it was always sort of like 50-50 in those early sort of days. And I suppose later on, as our wines sort of become a little bit more known at home, and people have visited the winery and shared the story with friends, it's sort of expanded.
In a perfect world, what would you like your domestic market to represent? Are you there now at 70, or would you like to see 80, 85?
No, I think that's sort of comfortable.
70.
Yeah, and I think actually, funny enough, our dad always said that what he wanted to do is do 30% ex the winery, 30% around Australia, and 30% export, and that meant that we could drink 10% of it.
Brilliant things.
Yeah.
So, what do we have in front of us here? These are two different wines. Well, do you want to start with this one right here?
Yeah, let's give that a bit of a whirl. So I suppose we just thought there's a couple here that we'll have a look at. We're sort of using with the three gardens, three of the principal varieties of the Barossa. This is Shiraz, basically Shiraz, Grenache and Mourvedre. These are like sort of, for us, like I said, the three principal varieties that have been in the Barossa really since the go-get of the region.
And how long have you guys made three gardens? A while, right?
Yeah, have done for a while.
What was the first vintage? Do you remember?
First vintage was, I think, in fact, it was 2001.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and for us, it's like, I think this is the current vintage, which is 2009 here. The whole idea of this is, we think that when you've got Shiraz that has this sort of flavour profile, and Grenache that has this flavour profile, and Mourvedre like here, when you can actually start to integrate all those,
yes,
you're actually starting to get sort of a glass of wine that should be able to sort of have layers and different flavour aspects. And this wine's always changed actually percentage-wise, so some years it could be an SMG, some years it could be a GSM, and ultimately what we do is we look at all the parcels, and in the end we want to make the best wine of the season. So instead of trying to limit...
Could that conceivably be a scenario where you would go 80% Shiraz, 12 and 8? Or are you always going to keep them in those 40, 30, 20s?
Well, I think it'll just come down to the year. So, for example, if you get a year whereby, let's say, you tend to get a bit more heat at the end of the vintage, you might actually have a lot more of your Shiraz in play already, but then you might find some of your Grenache or Mourvedre vineyards are affected by that. So in the end, that's what I suppose we try to do. And not only that, by having actually a really diverse lot of vineyards throughout, covering a fairly broad spread of the Barossa. So out of like the 28 original villages of the Barossa, we have vineyard sources that cover something like 19 of those.
Wow.
So from south to north and east to west. So, and traditionally in the Barossa, as actually the vintage ripens, it tends to ripen from the south and go north. So
you started the winery in 1996.
Yep.
Has your family been in the wine business prior to that?
Yeah, my immediate family has. Like, my father was the general manager of a small little company called Rockford's for a little while.
Great wines.
Yeah, and and Robert O'Callaghan, he's certainly been a mentor to a lot of the smaller sort of
He's
families.
a legend.
Yeah, definitely is a living legend too, which is good.
Yes.
And then my brother worked for Lando and another business called Tarak, and I worked for Yalumba and did a little bit of work in Lando. And then my dad's cousin who's involved, his grandfather started St. Hallett Wines.
Sure.
And then
Old Block Shiraz is still one of my favorite wines, period.
Yeah, and really the start of people really understanding the importance of old vineyards.
Sure.
Not only particularly in our own backyard.
So this wine's coming across great. I mean, it's a little young.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a baby. It's a 9 on the bottle, so you're still feeling some of that alcohol on the initial attack. But other than that, the fruit is quite clean, is what I would say. Very clean fruit, beautiful red fruit, nice long finish, well integrated. Kind of like a Rhone wine on steroids. Kind of it has some Rhone characteristics to it with a little more sunshine to it.
Yeah. I think one of the things that a lot of people sort of characterise our wines about too is that they always tend to have a little bit more nice bright acidity and things like that as well, which I think has worked very well for the style of wine that we're making.
And so what's been going on in the domestic market trend-wise? Have you seen some new trends emerge? Have you seen any varietals kind of spike or people are starting to talk about in Australia?
Well, I suppose really in our own little backyard, there's a lot of people playing around with different varieties from different varieties to our region, like so Tempranillo. You've seen a little bit of people playing around with the Sauvignon, which was originally our Brigno, which was and they were making some really quite exciting wines out of those. Then you get some people up in the hills that are mucking around, and even like, for example, Yalumba, they've been really one of the catalysts of bringing in some great clones of different varieties, and they're happy to share a lot of that around the place as well. So that's exciting. I think the other thing though too is that people are rediscovering some of those traditional varieties because, as you may be aware, like even just making Shiraz, in Australia, like the first really Shiraz was sort of really coming to the fore in the 1950s, 1960s, and Cabernet particularly as well. And to me personally, I think we only were really truly making Barossa wines, sort of the late 80s, early 90s, that I think really encapsulated who we were, instead of rather trying to emulate another region because there was a little bit of insecurity.
For sure.
Yeah.
So what's this right here? This is the Orphan Bank.
Yeah, so this is Orphan Bank Shiraz.
2008. And what price point is this usually come in? Suggested retail?
Yeah, probably around about the $50, $60 mark.
Okay. And how much was the 3 Gardens? We didn't get to that.
3 Gardens be around $20.
Okay, nice value. Okay, so 50, 60 bones, that range.
So this
is fairly a more recent addition?
Yeah, Orphan Bank really started for us in 2004.
Okay.
It actually came about because one of the vineyards that we were using in the winery, a 140-year-old Shiraz patch, which was actually sort of in the middle of the township, was being basically looking at being bulldozed for housing in 2006. So they're going to rip this old vineyard up. So what we decided to do is we tried to encourage them to keep this vineyard in, and obviously our passion for old vines comes from our mentors and people in the region that have promoted the virtues of old vines, like Robert O'Callaghan and people like that, Charlie Melton and so on.
Charles Melton makes some great wines.
Oh, mate, it's like...
Great wines.
Yeah, and we're just
like... Who makes 9 Popes?
That's Charlie.
Yes, that's what I thought,
Yeah.
Beautiful stuff.
I know. And they're just like 2 guys out of like numerous people in the Barossa that have been making great wines for many years. And I suppose for us it was like to see this vineyard be ripped out for housing was a little bit disappointing. So we actually came up with a cunning and devious plan, and we actually went in there and we dug up each vine one at a time, and we literally moved it 1 kilometre down the road to our own property.
Get out of here.
No.
How were you able to do that? You stole it?
When the grower wasn't looking, no, he was happy with the idea. In fact,
Really?
assisted us with it. We literally went in with this big machine, like had 3 little.
Did you guys have to buy it, or he was just for you guys to save it?
He was happy for us just to take each vine because he was going to rip it out anyway. So it's safe. Yeah. So in the end, it took something like 800 kilometres by tractor to move this vineyard to our property.
Tell me why this wine, which is, you make big style wines. This is the price point that I would expect big style. This to me starts showing the potential of what's happening in Barossa. This is not as over the top. Are you guys is this on purpose that this is a lot more, I don't want to call it balanced because I think that was so unfair against Barossa, but this is clearly not a 1998, 2001 style. I feel like if you were to make this wine 10 years ago, it might have had a little bit of a different style to it. Have you guys created a sensibility? I'm blown away that a wine from this kind of producer, which is known for big, big, powerful wines, and I definitely remember the 98s and 01s and 03s, with how they came across. This to me has a little bit more elegance and balance than I would have expected.
Yeah.
Is that on purpose? Is that by accident? Is that, am I out of my mind? What's happening here?
This is a genuine evolution of our winery. 02 was the first year. You mentioned 98 and 01. Well, 02 was the first year we started open fermenting and basket pressing our wines fully. So we weren't going for over extraction. 01 is actually one of the warmest years in 100 years in the Barossa as well. So that obviously gave a lot more.
Sugar levels.
Yeah. So, but no, for us, it's always been a little bit about restrained finesse, but still with the ability to age and give good length for sure.
This is a wine that I wish a lot of people who've written off Barossa could taste.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of consumers in the U.S. market who, after that big explosion, just it fell by wayside, like the Turley Zinfandels in California and some of the cold wines. And this has dramatically more balance to me than what I think is on paper for these kind of wines.
Yeah, and I also think too that, like, for us, we're an example, but it's certainly, these are people that live in the Barossa and they live and breathe in the Barossa. So we make wines that we're used to or have had the privilege of tasting over many years. And we're just one example of numerous Barossa wineries that have got this restraint and haven't got this big, massive sort of style. So they're out there, you just got to find them.
Is there anything you want to leave the Cork'd audience with, as a thought or a statement or a question? Maybe they can leave the answers in the comments. Anything you want to, I'm blown away by this wine. I think this is spectacular. This is fine. And a very solid wine. One, it's substantially young.
Yeah.
I think if you were to buy this one, you need to look at some serious decanting or probably a couple years on the shelf. This is an 08 and a more quality cuvee, luxury cuvee. It blows me away how drinkable it is. So if you have an opportunity, I highly recommend going out and trying some of these wines. But as we wrap up this video, is there anything you kind of want to leave the audience with, or any questions or thoughts?
Well, I suppose the main thing for me is just revisiting Barossa, having a look at it. I think obviously Barossa sometimes has been put in the big Australia bag.
Yes.
And, there's lots of fantastic producers from the Barossa. And I think one of the key things is, fall in love with your bottle shop guy again and go out there and you literally have a look at what's going on and taste as many wines. And that would be something that I would sort of suggest.
Is there a lot of buzz within the Barossa of people recognizing how people outside the Barossa have viewed the wines, that they've been too over-extracted, too fruit-bomb? Has there been a conscious effort by some of the producers to relax a little bit and try to let not every wine squeeze every ounce and just be bombastic? Or has everybody said, this is what we make and they'll come back around? What's the pulse of the producers?
Well, personally, I think that the Barossa's probably been driven by a few people, and they're the ones that really have pushed the boat through. And but really the guys who are in the Barossa that have been making wines, getting out on the road and slowly opening them, I think that this is sort of the style that they've always done. So there is a genuine
rebirth.
Yeah, I think so, and new discovery.
Well, thank you so much, my friend.
All right, Gary.
Check out these wines, revisit Barossa, and please leave a comment or a question. We'll make sure we both jump in.